For the Dark Reign review, we're going to start things off with gameplay. The first thing that anyone will notice when they play this game is that using a controller definitely makes it harder, but for all the wrong reasons. There's so many combinations of buttons that you need to memorize that it's really hard to take advantage of everything the game has to offer.
Speaking of controls, when it comes to controlling your units, they are very slow to react to your command, and the armies that you command do not flow very well.
With that said, the main complaint would have to be the fact that when you send in an army to fight, only a small amount of the units attacks while the others just wait like lambs in a slaughter. When I play this game, I must admit, it is a very difficult game.
There have been many times where I've had to take breaks in between just to clear my mind to give it another go. I was able to get through them after a while, but it makes it seem like a rough road to get to the end.
So it is a no-brainer whenever I say that the fun factor does take a beating, because trust me, no one wants to play a game that makes them frustrated, and this game can get under the skin of the best of us.
The one thing I have found the most disappointing, though, is that when I go to play online, no one is on. But this is what happens to most of these indie games on the Xbox Live Marketplace.
Now, to talk about replayability. As my colleague stated earlier, we haven't had the full opportunity to play online multiplayer because of the lack of people playing. Now we can only go off of the campaign and skirmish modes because of the lack of online play. From my experience, the fun factor was fair at best, but the game does have some redeeming aspects. The campaign lets you play as both sides of each mission, which gives people the ability to see the battles from each faction's perspectives, and that adds to its replayability. The game gives you the ability to switch between whichever faction you want to play whenever you want. And it was a necessity for me to get past certain levels because some were easier to complete than others, and I felt that some of the missions were near impossible. It may seem like a good thing, but there is something negative about it. You might have been able to piece this together yourself, but I still feel the need to point this out. By switching between the two factions, it gives you the feeling that you are getting bits and pieces of two different stories, which can make it hard to follow. Yes, you could just focus on playing one faction and bite the bullet on the difficulty, but trust me, this game can get very frustrating. If you're like me, it steers you away from wanting to complete the game. And that just takes us back to square one, not getting the complete story.
Ah, the graphics. Yes, I would say that this is one of the strong points of the game. After all, it is a Redux. But I would not call them great, but I would argue that they are not mediocre. Let's start with the effects of the game. I was actually impressed with them, but not in the sense that you would think.
When a building takes damage, it actually looks like it has taken damage, as opposed to games you would expect from this time period.
But before we start comparing this game to games back in the day, let us not forget that this is a Redux. So there are some expectations to be had to compare this game to today's standards. And with that said, the topic of quality comes into play.
In the menu, you are given limited options for settings graphics-wise, but you can notice significant change when it comes to the gameplay graphics in-game. Everything does seem to be an improvement, which is always great, even for a Redux of this sort.
Are we done yet? No? Oh, that's right, concept. This is one of the best categories to this game, because it does not get worse over time. It is like a classic book that never gets old. Although this game is a typical good versus bad, it is from the 1990s, so it is not exactly a rip-off video game-wise. When it comes to the concept, one question comes to mind. Did they achieve their goal? I would say yes. They made a futuristic game. Although hard to follow, it took me personally on a ride. However, there is some flaw to the Redux. The game was made with a controller and never re-released on PC, so it forced me to use a Xbox controller, which made it very hard.
The sound, I would have to say, is the best part of the game. It actually had some variety and it fit the game well. Although a remastered version of the original soundtrack would have been better, I felt that the original music was good enough. The music to the game is good, but that is not all that is considered when the topic of sound comes up. The sound of the effects also comes into play. When it comes to the effects of the units getting hit by bullets and buildings, taking damage and exploiting that sound actually kicks in pretty nicely. The one major problem I have with the sound effects would have to be the voice acting.
Whenever you click on a unit or move them around, they only have one line that they say over and over again. And that can get really annoying really fast, especially when you're playing a game where you are constantly having to control your units because of the way the army is handled in the game.
Before we head on to the final score, there is still one thing that needs to be addressed that I feel would not have fit properly in the gameplay section.
And that is that the menu takes forever to navigate. I mean, the transitions may have looked nice a bit back then, in the day, but now it just becomes frustrating in how long it takes for you to get to anything in the menu. Anyways, with that out of the way, it's time for the final score.
In conclusion, this game was not bad, but to me, I feel the game should not have been brought back. There were improvements made graphically, but the controller was just not working for me.
To us, we feel that the game would only really be interesting to people who are fans of the original. And that is why we here at Smoky Monkey Productions give this game a 6.5 out of 10. I'm Fetus Machine.
I'm T3.
And this has been a Smoky Monkey Productions review of Dark Reign Redux. Good night.
That's a good review. Yeah. I cannot wait for that Dark Reign Redux. Woo!